How often do you get the opportunity just to listen? How often do you actually actively listen? Well, I want to give you a minute to allow yourself to do that. So I'm going to start off by playing you a minute of sound. So please switch off those phones, just listen for 1 minute. Okay, thank you for listening through those small speakers. It was meant to be played out through larger speakers, but anyway, you did a good job, so thank you. So now I'd like you to say hello to the person you're sitting next to, and just say, I'll give you 10 seconds just to deliberate what you thought that sound was, if you did hear it. Okay, thank you everyone. I think that's 10 seconds. So, if you did hear that, you may be wondering what on earth it was. And I'm sure you had some great ideas there. I couldn't hear any because there's so many of you. But that was rhubarb. That was a massive popping rhubarb. And it was recorded here in Yorkshire, in West Yorkshire, actually, in the Rhubarb Triangle. And it's an area famous for growing rhubarb, and it was recorded by an artist called Duncan Chapman. So why am I getting you to listen in this way to a massive popping rhubarb? Well, I think that we have a very, very simple piece of technology that a lot of us take for granted, and that's our ears. I think that listening can change your world. I really do, and it's a very simple thing, but I'll explain why, and I'll start with me. This is me, and I have no idea how old I was when this was taken, but I was a brownie, so quite young. This was me before the throes of adolescence, before low self-esteem, anxiety, and later depression. And if that wasn't enough for you, I then developed a degenerative eye condition, which I have to this day. And I've had 3 eye operations, and as a result, I've always felt on the back foot in terms of everything visual. I've also taken a kind of solace in listening in those hard times. I've always felt it's a non-judgmental space where a sonic equality exists. And whether that would be when I was 12 years old, just closing my eyes in the playground, listening to the sounds around me, I always found it absolutely fascinating. And I think it's because it's free from a lot of the meaning and stereotypes that are quite rampant, I think, in our predominantly visual culture. Well, I now am a bit of a sound geek, and I explore the world through sound. I travel all over the place and record sounds just for my own enjoyment. It also has taken me to where I am now, Sound and Music, a charity where I'm humbled to support some of the most groundbreaking new music and sound today. So that's me. Attentive, curious listening tends to only be confined to certain contexts like this, or right now where, of course, you're paying me your full attention. But why is this so? Why do we only pay attention to those things that are in front of us? What about the hum of those speakers? What about the sound of the people in the corridor? Why does that not deserve the same amount of attention? Well, I know listening is difficult because we do live in this predominantly visual culture. And that's fine, I completely understand, and I don't listen enough either. But there are massive problems in a world that doesn't listen. And there are three main areas that these arise in. So firstly, I live and work in London, and I cycle to get around. And some say London has the most dangerous streets in the country. But nevertheless, I cycle. And hearing, for me, is very, very important when I'm cycling, because I know when a vehicle's coming up behind me before I turn to look. I can even kind of guess the size of it even. So I think it's as important as my vision. But I see this so often, and I just don't get it. I mean, your hearing is as important as your vision, as I said. And I think this neglect of such a vital sense is very emblematic and telling of a society that doesn't really value listening. So second of all, I think when we don't listen to each other on a global scale, it's really, really serious. Listening is the key to empathy and intercultural understanding. And if we don't listen to each other, it can lead to wide-scale misunderstandings, prejudice, discrimination, and one could even say conflict. So thirdly, on a more kind of appreciation level, why don't we appreciate these sounds that are not packaged up and presented to us as music? Why don't we listen to the hum of those speakers in that same way? Why not? I think that we're not paying attention to the richness and diversity the world of sound has to offer us. So those are the problems in a world that doesn't listen. What are the actual benefits of listening? Well, the act of listening itself has psychological benefits. And I'm not just talking about the old cliche of listening to classical music, but the act of listening itself. It's actually, the activity you did at the beginning is actually a sort of mindful activity. And you may have heard this term, it's quite a buzzword at the moment. So I'll explain it to you if you're not familiar. Mindfulness is the practice of noticing. And what you did at the beginning is, well, you stopped, listened and noticed whatever that was, whether it was the fact that the sound wasn't very high or the sound itself. So mindfulness has actually been proven to have incredible mental health benefits, including improving working memory, creativity, attention span, and reaction speeds, building those areas that lift mood and promote learning, and soothing the parts of the brain that produce stress hormones. So the benefits are enormous, and I want you to ask yourself what you think it would be like if you were taught this every day, or maybe your children were taught this every day. Well, at Sound and Music, we developed a resource that set out to do exactly that, and it's called Minute of Listening. It's a software application that provides a daily minute for children to listen to every single day of the school year, just like you did at the beginning. There's a massive bank of sounds in there, and I can show you just a few. There's Mozambican drumming. There's 3,000 people eating apples. Inside a clock tower. And even a bee symphony. I'd love to play you more of those. But these are then the questions that prompt discussion. And a lot of classes use thinking pairs, which is what I tried to simulate just a minute ago with you. But these are the kinds of questions. Then the sound is revealed, and there are further activities building on that sound and the context of it. So we piloted this in 80 schools around the country, involving 20,000 children, with two main objectives to test. One, to see if we could improve listening skills, and two, to build confidence in sharing opinions and perspectives on the world. So we had these two main objectives and we measured it. We had a look, and the results were quite significant. I mean, I've pulled out the ones that are most interesting to me here. So we asked, what impact, if any, did minute of listening have on your pupils in the following areas? So, as you can see, all quite impactful, but exercising creativity and imagination, opinion forming and sharing, and of course listening skills, I think are the most interesting here, and really show the benefits of listening. So, how does this kind of activity help you to listen to each other? That kind of intercultural understanding I talked about. Well, I don't know how many of you know these two people, but I'll just explain. Kanye West has just interrupted Taylor Swift at an awards ceremony. And this is a perfect example of the opposite of listening, that is, interrupting. Yet, how often when you're speaking to someone, do they interrupt you? Or it just feels like they're just waiting for their turn to interject? In contrast, imagine someone you know who pays you their full attention and how different that feels. Well, there's a book all about this called Time to Think by Nancy Klein, and she says that the quality of our thinking depends on the quality of the attention that other people give us. So in other words, we need to listen for each other as well as to each other. So going back to our evaluation of the pilot, we looked at opinion forming and sharing. So we asked what impact, if any, do you think minute listening had in this area? And as you can see, there's a big impact, and that is because a lot of the discussion was done using thinking pairs, what you just did at the beginning. And the activity is a bit more structured in that you pair up, you wait your turn to speak, and you know you'll have a chance to speak. And this, in theory, develops your ideas much better. And I can tell you for one, it really does work. We use it at Sound and Music, and it really works to develop our ideas. So Sir Ken Robinson once said at a TED conference that schools are killing our creativity, and that by stigmatizing mistakes, we're actually educating people out of their creative capacities. Well, when we looked at our results, we saw a massive impact on creativity and imagination. And, well, the theory is that we expose children to a daily sound every single day, not just music, of sounds, of random things, as you just heard, 3,000 people eating apples. And the exposure to these sounds gives them a sort of bank of sounds from which to fire off in loads of different directions, to do that kind of divergent thinking that happens a lot in innovation, and as we heard about earlier. And, you know, I think that this is a key skill. We all know it's very important in terms of innovation to have that kind of bank of ideas there and the kind of exposure. So I think we all have the power to be innovators. It's not just for those chosen few, and you can exercise that through listening. Well, I'd like to give you just a few more seconds to practice active listening. And before I do so, I'm going to read you a poem. And it's by Mary Oliver. It's called Wild Geese. Some of you may know it. But I'd like you to listen after this with this in mind. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So I'd like you to let the world offer itself to you, as Mary Oliver says. From now on, I'd like you to be curious. We should all be curious, listeners. And I'd like you to teach your children that, and I'd like you to teach your colleagues that. And as I said, I'll give you just a few more seconds to practice that now. Thank you.